Korea's Voice to the World. I'm Munun Bhattacharya. Coming up in the next hour. Ahead of the BRICS Summit starting Tuesday in Johannesburg, South Africa's president calls for expanding the economic bloc, says he intends to create positive opportunities for the continent and not just for the country.
The value of BRICS extends beyond the interests of its current members.
A camera on the Chandrayaan-3's lander captures the moon's far side as it tries to locate a safe landing area for its descent on the 23rd of August. North Korea's leader oversees a cruise missile test just as South Korea and the US kick off annual military drills. After drenching northern Mexico, tropical storm Hillary hits Los Angeles with heavy rains. Record rainfall forecast. California's governor declares a state of emergency for the south of the state. Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa are seeking to develop deeper trade and economic ties. The BRICS bloc of emerging world economies is holding its 15th summit in Johannesburg from the 22nd of August to the 24th. Here's a look at the key focus areas at this year's summit.
This is the first time BRICS leaders are gathering since the COVID-19 pandemic hit. But the summit will be marked by the absence of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is participating remotely. The summit is expected to cover a wide range of issues. One of the key topics is the expansion of the group, as 40 countries have shown interest.
Them coming to the table with us will only strengthen the South-to-South cooperation that we need for a sustainable future. So I'm absolutely delighted that the countries have come knocking at the BRICS doors rather than us having to go to them.
BRICS members will also discuss cross-border trade in local currencies to reduce dependency on the US dollar. Altogether, the 5 member nations account for more than 40% of the world's population, and their combined GDP is more than 26% of the global economy.
The BRICS mechanism has the potential to become a crucial organization in determining global development. Its potential lies not only in the economy, but also in the various initiatives it promotes. In my view, the BRICS countries are ready to set a reform agenda for the current global economic order.
Promoting settlement in local currencies is a big issue that will be discussed during the summit. BRICS has emphasized financial cooperation since its establishment and has promoted the reform of the World Bank and IMF, as well as establishing the new development bank. BRICS opposes the hegemony of the US dollar and pursues the reform of the global financial system.
Experts say the summit is a major opportunity for BRICS leaders to counter Western dominance around the world.
The summit, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has said that with the upcoming BRICS summit, he intends to create positive opportunities not only for South Africa, but for the African continent at large. Isabel Nakiria reports.
South Africa President Cyril Ramaphosa says the BRICS summit will present opportunities for Africa. The BRICS countries make up one of the world's biggest economic blocs, representing a quarter of the global economy. President Ramaphosa is pushing for Africa to partner with the bloc and strengthen investment and economic ties. Johannesburg says it supports the expansion of the BRICS, though it's a matter that requires the concession of all members.
The value of BRICS extends beyond the interests of its current members. For its efforts to be effective, BRICS needs to build partnerships with other countries that share its aspirations and perspectives.
Several countries have already expressed interest, and more than 20 have formally applied to join BRICS. President Ramaphosa says there are huge financial opportunities that Africa can gain from the new BRICS Bank. The BRICS Bank has financed multi-billion-dollar projects in South Africa, including clean energy, water infrastructure, and greenhouse gas emission reduction. Isabel Nakiria in Johannesburg, reporting for DD India.
Shubhendu Ghosh joins us live from Johannesburg. Shubhendu, have leaders started arriving for the summit? And is the focus primarily on one, de-dollarization or use of more of the local currencies in the BRICS nations for trade and expansion of BRICS this time around?
Right, Munmun, greetings from Johannesburg. In fact, about 40-50 kilometers away from Johannesburg in Pretoria. And little about this place. This is an educational institution which houses a center called Gandhi Mandela Training Center, which has been established here with development assistance from India. It's important to establish the context because that is also stands very high as far as the BRICS agenda is concerned. Development partnership between the BRICS member countries. Talking about the leaders and their arrival, the excitement definitely has started building up. A significant number of business delegations have already arrived earlier this week. They are engaging. The idea that primarily BRICS countries being a congregation of leading emerging economies, what is the way in which these economic ties could be strengthened? What is the way in which investment
Correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh reporting on the issues that are on the agenda as far as the 15th BRICS Summit in Johannesburg is concerned. He is at Pretoria at a very key location there because there is a development center that has been built there, as he told us, with the assistance of India, and there is a strong development relationship that the two have. So, Shubhendu, you are building towards the key focus areas. Are they de-dollarization as well as expansion of BRICS this time around?
Oh, those themes certainly, Munmun, are in focus. The expansion of this BRICS grouping could become bigger than the 5 countries that it represents at the moment. And of course, de-dollarization, the way in which local currencies could be promoted, if a common currency could come up. Those are issues in greater focus this time. But remember, this is the 15th edition of BRICS. There are a lot of important issues that the BRICS congregation has been building upon. There is impact of climate change. There is increasing efforts for capacity building in each of the member countries. Post-pandemic recovery, what is the way in which the supply chains could be made more resilient and reimagined, the manner in which development journey could in fact be taken into the greater African continent. Those themes continue to be of great significance, but yes, a greater interest and attention on the expansion aspect and of a common currency, but both these aspects are going to take time. Important conversations are expected this time over, but transforming it into reality is definitely going to take longer.
Absolutely, Shubhendu. Also, what are you hearing on the likely bilateral meetings of Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the sidelines?
We yet to get your updates on the bilaterals that are lined up for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He would be engaging with the South African leadership for sure. But with regards to other countries, particularly China, there's a lot of interest, the manner in which both the leaders could possibly engage. We don't have an official update on that, but this congregation will give an opportunity for Prime Minister Narendra Modi to engage with leadership, not just of BRICS nation, but also other developing nations. There are over 60 leaders from other developing countries, from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America, who, besides being very keen to be a part of BRICS, are also going to join in as far as conversation on the global south is concerned. So in that sense, a very, very fertile opportunity for leaders to engage with their counterparts from the world.
Shubhendu, from India's perspective, is this also going to be an opportunity to meet and greet just ahead of the Leaders Summit in New Delhi on the 9th and 10th of September for the G20?
Oh, absolutely. And not just a formal meet and greet, but as far as agenda setting is concerned, we see a lot of parallels between what the vision that BRICS has for the world and that of G20 as well. Under India's G20 presidency, we've seen a greater focus on the priorities of the global south. And here, BRICS is in fact a strong congregation of the countries of the global south, of emerging economies, of developing economies. So the deliberations done here talking about the way forward for emerging economies, for bringing in the voice of the Global South on the Greater Platform, is going to be, in fact, further amplified at the G20 Leaders Summit, which is set to take place in a few days in New Delhi.
Absolutely. So the focus is going to be continue on the themes that will be discussed in the BRICS Summit. Thanks, Shubhendu, for joining us from Johannesburg. The Indian diaspora in Johannesburg is excited to welcome Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who will be visiting the city for the upcoming BRICS Summit.
I give a warm welcome to our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji to the Rainbow Nation in South Africa. We are so proud of your leadership, and you are such an inspiring leader.
I am sure India will become superpower in this world. All citizens of India who has got roots in India should be proud of welcoming our Prime Minister to South Africa.
We are also very grateful to the Prime Minister of India for visiting South Africa. He is a role model of the world and he inspires everyone in this world. We hope he has an excellent stay and successful trip in South Africa.
South African former cricketers are also not far behind in welcoming the Indian Prime Minister. South African cricket coach and a former cricketer Gary Kirsten extended good wishes for the upcoming BRICS Summit.
Dear Prime Minister Modi, it is my privilege to welcome you and your delegation to South Africa. I've been very fortunate to spend lots of time in India during my playing and my coaching career. I also have many fond memories during my time coaching Team India and was always so grateful for the support of the proud Indian people. This year will also be very special for global cricket when the World Cup returns to India. It promises to be another great sporting spectacle and no doubt will be enjoyed by the millions of cricket fans throughout India. Finally, I wish you and all the global leaders the very best for the upcoming BRICS Summit.
Another former South African cricketer, Jonty Rhodes, has also expressed happiness for the upcoming Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit.
Namaskar, Modi ji. I have just spent 2 wonderful weeks with my family in incredible India, and now it's our turn to welcome you to South Africa. So, Sawubona, Dumela, Huchanet. I really hope you are well, sir. Welcome for the BRICS conference, and we know as South Africans that you have a massive role on the international political and economic scene, and we thank you for your inputs.
And there's more from Johannesburg. India's BRICS Sherpa, Damu Ravi, talked with our DD India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh exclusively, where he highlighted Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's priorities for the BRICS Summit. Listen in.
Johannesburg in South Africa is all set to host the 15th BRICS Summit. I have with me Mr. Damu Ravi, India's BRICS Sherpa. Welcome to DD India, sir.
Thank
you. This is the first in-person leader summit after the pandemic. How does that raise the expectations, and what is new in this edition of BRICS Summit?
All the leaders to meet in person in this important event. South African leadership, particularly the President, has done enormous work.
If you could take us through India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's priorities in this edition of the BRICS Summit.
Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi has given a strong pitch for the development and the development dimension of the global discourse today. I think it dates back to the time when January earlier this year he hosted the Global South Summit, in which about 125 countries' leaders have participated. I think taking off from there, the deliberations within India's presidency of the G20 and the BRICS, there is a synergy developing, particularly the narrative on development coming from the developing countries' perspective, from the Global South, and how we need to develop that perspective and put it in the right way of understanding the women-led development, the food security, bringing in millets into the context, and the lifestyle for environment when you talk about climate change and energy. These are the important dimensions that are being discussed, and thankfully, there is a lot of synergy within the BRICS discussions. So all of this are going to be captured in the Johannesburg Declaration that will come out at the end of the BRICS Summit. I think the focus here today is to do projects in the developing world using the new development bank resources and the technologies and the innovation that is happening in the BRICS countries. That's been very well brought out in the roadmap for economic cooperation among the BRICS countries. So eventually, gradually, these programs are being implemented in the BRICS countries, and Africa becomes a very priority country for all of us.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks about the priorities of the Global South in every international platform. How will the BRICS Summit also form a very, very important place to engage with those ideas for him?
Yes, I think some of the low-cost solutions that India has successfully introduced can be brought into the Global South. I think one of which we've already discussed about the digital platform, the digital public goods is a very important enabler for development. And the second most important is the currency being discussed in the BRICS context right now. So again, Prime Minister has emphasized a lot on the doing trading in INR, so national currencies. So that's become...
Let's go across now for a press conference by the Ministry of External Affairs of the Government of India.
Having with us Shri Vinay Quatra, sir, Foreign Secretary, also joining us on the dais, Secretary West, Joint Secretary Central Europe, as well as Joint Secretary East and Southern Africa. Sir, may I hand over the floor for your opening remarks?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to friends from the media. Namaskar. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for this briefing on the upcoming visit of the Honorable Prime Minister of India to South Africa for the BRICS Summit, and then onwards to official visit to Greece. Honorable Prime Minister will depart tomorrow morning for Johannesburg, where he would be participating in the 15th BRICS Summit that actually starts tomorrow only and concludes on 24th of August. Just to recall, Honorable Prime Minister had last visited South Africa in July 2018. That was for the 10th BRICS Summit, and then in July 2016 for a bilateral visit. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, he had visited India in January 2019, where he was also the chief guest for the 70th Republic Day celebrations. The two leaders had also met in June 22 in Germany on the sidelines of the G7 Outreach Summit, and most recently they spoke to each other just a few weeks ago. South Africa is, as you all know, the incumbent BRICS chair, and the theme of the BRICS Summit this year is BRICS and Africa, Partnership for Mutually Accelerated Growth, Sustainable Development, and Inclusive Multilateralism. This would be the first in-person BRICS Summit after 3 consecutive years of virtual meetings owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. You are all aware of the importance that India attaches to the BRICS grouping and consider it as an important expression of global multipolarity. India last held the BRICS chairmanship in 2021. For us, it is also a platform that can address a number of global challenges, and also by contributing to building a fairer, inclusive, and open international architecture with sustainable development and economic growth at its core. In terms of program, upon his arrival on 22nd, Honorable Prime Minister will participate in the first event, which is the BRICS Leaders Retreat later tomorrow evening itself. This would be a closed-door engagement, and the expected agenda is likely to include discussions on global developments of concern and the role that the BRICS can play in addressing some of those developments and challenges. The next day, on 23rd August, Prime Minister will participate in the 15th BRICS Summit. The summit itself is structured into 2 sessions. One, a closed plenary that is likely to focus more on items pertaining to intra-BRICS cooperation, as also the reform of the multilateral system and counter-terrorism issues. Thereafter, there is an open plenary which would actually see participation of other entities and organizations that are associated with BRICS. This would include the president of the New Development Bank, the chair of the BRICS Business Council, and the chair of BRICS Women's Business Alliance. The participants are likely to deliberate on issues such as global economic recovery amid ongoing geopolitical challenges, sustainable development goals, something that would, I think, continue throughout the different sessions of the BRICS Summit, women-led development, as also addressing the concern and interest and priorities of the Global South. The summit would conclude on 23rd, and on 24th, Prime Minister will participate in BRICS Africa Outreach and BRICS Plus dialogue. We understand that the host country, South Africa, has invited a number of guest countries from Africa, as well as other emerging markets and developing countries to participate in this event on 24th. Partnership with Africa, how the partnership with Africa can actually shape and contribute to the development of the Global South will figure as one of the items, important items in the deliberations on 24th. You are all aware of India's own views and efforts in this regard, which were very clearly and in detail reflected in the Voice of Global South Summit that was hosted by the Honorable Prime Minister in January earlier this year. These priorities of the Global South, just to touch upon here, are also reflected are going to be reflected in the upcoming G20 summit also, given the fact that this G20 presidency of India will see the largest ever participation from Africa in the summit to be held next month. For the 15th BRICS Summit, a business delegation from India is also traveling to South Africa to attend the BRICS Business Tracks meetings and also the meetings of the BRICS Business Council, BRICS Women Business Alliance, and the BRICS Business Forum. After completing his engagements in Johannesburg relating to the BRICS Summit and to the BRICS Outreach and BRICS Plus Summit, Prime Minister would travel to Greece for an official visit on 25th of August 2023 at the invitation of His Excellency the Prime Minister of Greece. A ceremonial welcome on arrival in Athens, which would be followed by the visit to the tomb of the unknown soldier, where the Prime Minister would lay a wreath. Prime Minister will thereafter have a restricted and delegation level talks with the Honorable Prime Minister of Greece. Both leaders would also address the key businesses of both countries later after the delegation level talks. Prime Minister would also interact with the Indian diaspora in Greece. Just to recall here, Honorable Prime Minister had met the Greek Prime Minister in New York last in September 2019 on the sidelines of the UNGA. The important thing to mention here is that the last prime ministerial visit from India to Greece was in 1983. So it is after a considerable length of long period of time actually that a prime ministerial visit from India is taking place to Greece. Previous high-level exchanges between the two countries have also included a visit by former presidents of India, late Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, and also former President Shri Ramnath Kovindji in June 2018. The Greek president had also paid a state visit to India in 1998, and the then Greek Prime Minister had visited India in 2008. Greece is one of India's important European partners. It's a member of the EU, of NATO, and a gateway to Europe and also to the EU market, and enjoys a privileged position at the crossroad of Asia, Europe, and Africa. Both India and Greece are not just modern democracies, but we also share close and age-old historical and cultural relations. Important elements of our partnership include defense and security, shipping, and most recently, the elements relating to the migration and mobility are being given shape in terms of structural partnership between India and Greece. Greece has also been a strong supporter and a partner with India on issues of core interest in the UN and other international organizations, including their support to our permanent membership in the expanded UN Security Council. During the Honorable Prime Minister's visit to Greece, both sides will look to expand and diversify the trade and investment segment of cooperation, deepen and expand the defense and security partnership, infrastructure cooperation, shipbuilding industry, something which is a great strength of Greece and where the opportunities, extensive opportunities are there, energy, agriculture, education, and as I mentioned earlier, migration and mobility. The visit would give both sides an opportunity to discuss also the regional and global issues of mutual interest and help broaden and deepen our bilateral engagement. I would stop here, and if there are questions, we'll try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Ground rules, please. Please introduce yourself and the organization you represent. I'll start with you, Yeshi.
This is Yeshi Seri from the New Indian Express. So what are the chances of PM Modi having a bilateral with Chinese Premier Xi Jinping?
Siddhant.
So my question is India's stance on the expansion of the grouping. And another question, this is on Greece basically. What will be India's focus when it comes to connectivity plans connecting India with the Mediterranean via the Arab world?
Sorry, via the Arab world?
Yeah, this connectivity plan. So.
Okay. Yeah, please. Before that. Yeah.
सर मधुरेंद्र मैं न्यूज़ नेशन से डिफेंस और सिक्योरिटी टाइज को लेकर आपने बात कही इंडिया और ग्रीस के बीच में क्या इस पर और आप फोकस कर सकते हैं कि किन क्षेत्रों में दरअसल डिफेंस सेक्टर में दोनों देश अपने जो टाइज हैं उसको बढ़ाएंगे और मैरीटाइम में दरअसल क्या होने वाला है?
Manush.
This is Manas from PTI. Around 40 countries have shown interest in joining BRICS, and 23 countries have already submitted their applications. So what will be India's approach in expansion of BRICS, and how we are going to support the countries? What will be the criteria?
I'll come back to you. Yeah, go ahead.
सर मैं मनीष झा हूँ TV9 से। मुझे जितना समझ में आ रहा है सर कि अब तक भारत सरकार ये कहती आई थी पोस्ट मई 2020 के बाद कि जब तक PLA अपनी पोजीशन से पीछे नहीं हट जाता तब तक इंडिया और चाइना के पॉलिटिकल रिलेशन नॉर्मल नहीं हो सकते हैं। तो अगर प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी और शी जिनपिंग की मुलाकात होती है ब्रिक्स से अलग होकर, तो क्या हम कहें कि PLA अपनी पोजीशन से हट गई, और अगर नहीं मुलाकात होती है तो क्या कहें कि PLA अभी तक उसी पोजीशन पे बना हुआ है?
Sir, should we take on more questions or should we take it sets? Okay. Yeah. No, I saw your hand. Yeah, go ahead. Come back. Microphone, please.
So Nivedita from the Sunday Guardian, 2 questions. If you could please share the details of the business delegation accompanying the Prime Minister, and also is there any likelihood of the Prime Minister taking up the issue of many countries which have expressed interest in joining the rupee trade arrangement? Would that be part of the business talks?
Business talks. Okay. So we'll take next round. So please.
Let me group the questions relating to India-China meeting. Yeshi asked, and then others asked the same question in different ways. आपने कहा होती है, नहीं होती है. All I would say is that, as I mentioned in my remarks, the host country, South Africa, has invited large number of guest countries, besides, of course, the BRICS members who would be present there. The Prime Minister's schedule in terms of bilateral meetings with those leaders who would be present in South Africa is still being developed, and as and when we have details of confirmation of Honorable Prime Minister's different bilateral meetings, we would definitely apprise our media friends of those meetings. Second set of questions relating to BRICS expansion. Somebody mentioned about 40, 23 large number of countries having expressed interest in the expansion of the BRICS. Look, there is no doubt that there is considerable interest in many countries to become a part of BRICS, to associate themselves with BRICS, to leverage different opportunities that the BRICS and the cooperation under the BRICS presents for itself. Insofar as the BRICS expansion is concerned, we have been very clear from the start that we have a positive intent and an open mind when it comes to the BRICS expansion. As you all know, BRICS works under the modality and principle of consensus, and all the BRICS countries have to have full consensus on how they would want BRICS expanded, what should be the guiding principles of that expansion, what would be the criteria for such an expansion. Those are the subject matters of ongoing current discussions between the Sherpas of the BRICS in South Africa, and I would not want to prejudge the outcome of these discussions, except to say, as I said earlier, that India has a positive intent and an open mind when it comes to BRICS expansion. With regard to the set of questions relating to specific questions relating to the BRICS business delegation, which the colleague from the Guardian, Sunday Guardian, asked. The business delegation is the BRICS business platform, including the Business Forum, the Women Business Alliance, is a very robust and a vibrant mechanism and pillar for the BRICS, intra-BRICS economic cooperation. And we are expecting a sizable business delegation to participate in these meetings. The component which is part of the BRICS Summit deliberations itself, which would be in the open plenary, is a much smaller delegation, and we'll share the details with you once that part of the delegation of Honorable, who would be present along in the session where Honorable Prime Minister will be there, will share with you. Otherwise, the delegation representatives from the business entities would be participating in associated events of, as I said, the BRICS Business Forum, the BRICS Business Women Alliance. With regard to the question on greater cooperation with Greece, whether it is defense and security or the economic trade aspects, I would request my colleague, Secretary West, Sanjay Verma, to speak. But if I can just, before doing that, just touch upon the connectivity question which was asked. Look, we look at connectivity as I would say, as one of the driving impulses for a greater and a stronger and deeper cooperation between any two sets of countries. Connectivity has always been an important element in our discussions with all our partners. And we don't limit the connectivity discussions only to infrastructure connectivity projects. The connectivity for us has a far wider conceptual connotation that includes digital connectivity, connectivity between the people. So when we speak of mobility and migration, it is connecting the two societies, connecting the two people. Financial connectivity. So there was a question relating to the India rupee trade, for example. it is one of the key instruments of connecting the trade ecosystems between the two countries. But so there, I'll just make that remark on the larger connectivity point you mentioned. But if I could just quickly answer the specific part relating to India rupee trade. Look, it has been our strong and proactive effort to see how the instruments of trade expansion, how best we can position them in any given relationship. One of the first India rupee trade arrangements in recent months has been the one which was announced with the UAE. I am given to understand that the initial shipments relating to India dirham rupee trade have commenced and have successfully been completed. We are soon going to bring out a set of the standard operating procedures also, do an extensive outreach to the business community for them to see how this India rupee trade arrangements could be leveraged. Naturally, it would be our interest to see that it could be expanded to as many countries as possible. The India trading arrangements in another currency always have very extensive regulatory elements, but also the elements that involves the commercial banking channels, something which requires extensive due diligence. But as a matter of priority, we would definitely be pursuing them. How far we reach with them is something to be seen. With this, if I could request my colleague Sanjay to speak on to the elements of cooperation between India and Greece during this visit.
Well, thank you, Foreign Secretary. The question was specifically pertaining to cooperation in the defense sector. As you know, Greece is pivotally located in the Eastern Mediterranean. It has been a significant maritime power in merchant shipping. It controls probably one of the biggest shipping lines in terms of dead tonnage, and that spin-off runs into its naval capacities. It apparently has the third best navy in the European Union. Just a matter of weeks ago that we had a naval exercise with the Greeks in Greece, which was preceded in
There you are hearing a press conference by the Ministry of External Affairs on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's upcoming visit to Johannesburg, as well as Greece is going to Johannesburg for the 15th BRICS Summit. He arrives there. The summit takes place on the 24th of this month. On the 23rd, the day before the summit, he will be participating in a leaders' retreat. And a day after the summit, that is on the 24th, in fact, he will be participating in an outreach session with various African countries, and BRICS dialogue session will also take place. So tomorrow is the 22nd. That's when the Prime Minister arrives in Johannesburg, and 23rd, the main BRICS Summit takes place, and 24th, the outreach session with various African countries and a BRICS dialogue session will take place, and that will be followed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Greece, where there is a lot of focus on the defense and strategic partnership. Also, Prime Minister will be meeting the top leadership in Greece, and he'll also be addressing members of the Indian diaspora there. As far as the various issues that are on the agenda is concerned, there was a reference to how trade could take place more in local currencies. India already has such an arrangement with the UAE, where we are seeing forward movement as far as dirham rupee trade is concerned. Besides that, in the bilateral meetings, the Foreign Secretary of the Government of India said that no confirmation has come in yet on any bilateral meeting, including that with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And overall, the focus of the BRICS Summit is going to be on tackling various geopolitical and economic challenges. Besides, the focus is also going to be on women-led development and fast-tracking the SDGs with a goal of achieving them by 2030. Time for us to take a breather. Still to come on DD India News Hour, Denmark and Netherlands announced plans to send F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. And relentless wildfires plunge Canada's British Columbia into a state of emergency. Military deployed to battle the blazes. A camera on the Chandrayaan-3's lander captures the moon's far side as it tries to locate a safe landing area for its descent on the 23rd of August.
Namaste India.
Namaste land.
Marhaban ila al-Hind. Zari India.
Salam
India. Namaste India.
Namaskar Bharata.
Muy
Nous
India.
sommes land.
Nahnu Hunud. India. Ma Hindi Hasti. Mung Hindian.
Salam Hindustan.
We are India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Unman Bhattacharya, and let's get perspective now on the upcoming 15th BRICS Summit. Joining us is Anil Kumar Trigunayat, former Indian ambassador. Ambassador Trigunayat, such a pleasure to have you on DD India. For starters, why are so many countries interested in joining the BRICS? Because we heard that from the Foreign Secretary, and so many countries have also formally applied for membership.
Well, as you know, for many years, there have been really no expansion after South Africa joining the BRICS. But the global landscape has completely changed. And today, as we are seeing that once again, there is a greater focus on multilateralism. There is a greater focus on the countries that are growing. For example, India is the fastest growing country, and it is a part of the BRICS, which is an economic arrangement to a great extent. And that all these countries are also the voice of the Global South in that sense. They take care of the interests of the Global South. And I think in that sense, more and more countries are looking at some kind of an alternative which is viable to the existing order, which has mostly disappointed a very large number of countries. And so I think that this is something probably they're looking at spreading their risks and wanting to be part of a growing trajectory which is provided by the BRICS countries. And so therefore, I think that that is something is essentially both the geopolitics, the level of geoeconomics, and the available opportunities, as well as some kind of a genuineness as far as countries like India are concerned towards the Global South.
Right, Ambassador, we also know that various countries would like more trade in their local currencies. We've seen the example with some trade beginning as far as India and UAE is concerned with rupee as well as dirham. There was a reference to it by the Foreign Secretary. But going forward, do you see a common currency coming up and how challenging would that be?
Well, it has been on the cards for a while. But if you come to think of it, the BRICS do have their own development bank, which is called the New Development Bank, and which has roughly about $50 billion in its capital. And they are hoping to get it to $100 billion. And there is a greater, again, it is because of the kind of geopolitics, kind of sanctions regimes, and kind of unilateralism in the financial discourse or weaponization of the financial instruments. We are seeing increasingly more and more countries are trying to trade in their bilateral currencies so that transaction costs and uncertainties are avoided. And that's what India has done, has signed up with about 19 countries. And actually, we always had India-rupee ruble trade for a very long time. Now we are talking to UAE, as you mentioned, under the CEPA. Already it has begun. Several other countries are looking at the possibilities. China has been doing the same. Russia has been doing the same. So what happens to the BRICS currency, which has been talked about? I don't think at this time this is...
Ambassador Trigunayat, thank you for joining us with your views from New Delhi. Moving on now to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Denmark and the Netherlands have agreed to send F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. Here's a report.
The offer came 2 days after the Netherlands and Denmark said the US had authorized the country to deliver American-made F-16s to Ukraine. Zelensky traveled to both countries to finalize the delivery deal. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, meeting with Zelensky at a Dutch Airways, said the planes would be delivered once specified conditions are met.
We can announce that the Netherlands and Denmark commit to transfer F-16 aircraft to Ukraine and the Ukrainian Air Force, in close cooperation with the United States and other partners, once the conditions for such a transfer have been met.
Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said Denmark will supply Ukraine with 19 F-16 fighters during a joint news conference with Ukrainian President at the Skydrupt Airways in Denmark.
We announced that we will donate 19 F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. Together with the Netherlands, we are the first country to make a solid and concrete commitment to donate Western fighter jets. And hopefully others will follow now.
Ukrainian officials have long asked for the advanced warplanes since the beginning of its war with Russia, which begins in February 2022. Zelensky calls the deal a breakthrough moment, but training for Ukrainian pilots could take months. The first delivery of Danish F-16s is expected around the start of the new year. DD India's Rahul Upadhyay reports.
Meanwhile, Moscow has accused Ukraine of terrorism after a fresh wave of drone attacks in the Russian regions. Ukraine drone strikes, both on border regions and on the Russian capital, have become increasingly common in recent months. Russian Foreign Ministry has said that the goals of the special military operation in Ukraine have become the priority of the country's foreign policy. Dasha Chernyshova is in Moscow with more.
Moscow says Ukraine attempted to attack at least 4 Russian regions on Sunday. 5 people got injured in Kursk as a drone hit a railway station that triggered a fire. In Rostov, the governor says no injuries or damage has been reported after Ukrainian kamikaze drones were intercepted by the Russian air defense systems. 2 of Moscow's airports were forced to halt air traffic as a result of an attempted drone attack. The Ministry of Defense says drones were jammed and crashed in an unpopulated area. In Belgorod region that borders Ukraine and is most often attacked by the Ukrainian armed forces, air defenses destroyed 12 airborne targets. We also have heard from the Russian Ministry of Defense saying that another drone attack was thwarted over the Belgorod region, with Russian air defenses shooting down plane-type unmanned aerial vehicles. These attacks are described in Russia as acts of terrorism. The Russian Foreign Ministry condemned those attacks against the civilian infrastructure. Commenting on what happened in Kursk, spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said the attack against the railway station makes the task of denazification of Ukraine and demilitarization of Ukraine an absolute priority for Russia's foreign policy. Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow, reporting for DD India.
And Dasha Chernyshova continues to be with us from Moscow. Also, Alex Carrier is joining us from Brussels. Starting with you, Alex, Zelensky says Ukraine will get 42 F-16s. Did the U.S. nod earlier for the delivery of the U.S.-made F-16s? And later, Zelensky's visit to both Denmark and the Netherlands sealed the deal.
Yeah, well, that's really a process that's been going on for a long time. As we heard from that report, the F-16 debate has been going on since the very start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, since the very beginning, since those Russian troops crossed into Ukrainian territory. This has been going on for a little while. The green light from the US 4 days ago was really that laid the foundation, that first step to getting those F-16s approved. The Dutch And the Danish and their coalition partners, about 16 countries working with the Netherlands and Denmark to get those F-16s to Ukraine, they couldn't have done anything without that approval from Washington, which came a few days ago. Now, that doesn't mean, as much as there's a commitment there and as much as the Dutch and the Danish have said they will be providing these F-16s, what isn't clear is exactly when. We know from Denmark they're delivering 19 jets. The first 6 will be shipped to Ukraine around the new year, so end of December, start of January. But we also know that the training for those Ukrainian pilots has only just started and will take 6 months at the very least, according to the US Air Force, to get them up to speed. And there's maintenance and logistics and supply chains. There's a lot going into getting these planes not just physically in Ukraine, but operational in the skies above Ukraine. So this will be certainly a story that we will be looking into for the next year at least.
Alex, stay with us. Dasha, I'll come to you. Has Russia threatened to escalate strikes as a response to Ukrainian drone strikes that we are seeing increasingly now in the border areas as well as in Moscow?
Well, we're certainly hearing from the Russian officials that they do condemn those acts of terrorism that are committed from the Russian perspective by the terrorist Kiev regime, as Moscow officials do describe that. We have seen a number of those drone attacks escalating over the course of the past weeks. Just this morning, we have heard from the Russian Ministry of Defense confirming the information that 2 drones attacked the Moscow region. One fell down in Pokrovskaya, that is in Ruza region in Moscow area, and another one was getting closer to the Russian capital when it was jammed by the electronic warfare. So certainly we are hearing more and more about those attacks, and pretty much on a daily basis over the course of the past 4 days we have heard about the attacks against the Moscow region happening on a daily basis. On Friday, a drone hit Expo Center near the Moscow city skyscrapers in downtown Moscow. So certainly they are intensifying. Russia has said it reserves the right to retaliate, but every time we hear that, Moscow is not clarifying what the response and what the retaliation would be. Certainly, before that, we have heard Moscow intensifying its attacks against the Ukrainian targets that Moscow says are the military infrastructure of Ukraine. And this morning, again, we have heard the Russian Ministry of Defense confirming that they have destroyed more military weapons, more weapons supplied from the Western countries to Ukraine. So certainly, Moscow is carrying out the goals of what is described as a special military operation in Ukraine. But those drone attacks are increasing the level of anxiety among the Russians and particularly the Muscovites as the holiday season is getting over.
Alex, coming back to you, can you tell us more about the expected delivery timeline for the jets? Like you said, 19 are expected to be delivered by the new year, but what about the others out of a total of 42? Also, is Ukraine looking forward to more F-16s from other countries as well?
Yeah, that's the crucial question, and one thing to say is that they will not be operational and anywhere near operational for the ongoing counter-offensive. The Ukrainian armed forces trying to push out those occupying Russian troops from the south and the east of the country. That will certainly not be an impact, but it is one of the reasons why the Ukrainians are so keen to get those F-16 in the air to give them a bit of an edge, a bit of an advantage in that fight. So we know that 6 will be shipped towards the end of this year, 8 in 2024 and 5 in 2025. Those are the Danish jets. We don't have a timeline yet for those Dutch jets. President Zelensky said it was going to be 42 F-16s from the Netherlands. That is not a confirmed number from the Dutch side. I should say there may be 6 fewer than that because they were pledged to being sold to an American private military company. So we'll be looking at that number. So the timeline for that isn't clear, but it's also important to understand that these jets are not a kind of plug and play, as we say. They're not like an artillery gun or a truck or an armored Humvee that they can be picked up very quickly. They need supply chain, they need spare parts, they need maintenance. All of these people need to be trained to operate these jets. They also operate different strategies, different methods, different culture, really a different way of doing things. And so these Air Force pilots, Ukrainian Air Force pilots, not only will have to be trained to fly the physical aircraft itself, but understand the tactics that come with flying these kind of aircraft. One expert saying the sooner they can fly like the US Air Force, the better it will be for them. But to give you an example of how far we are from that, those Ukrainian pilots at the moment are currently getting English language classes in the United Kingdom, so they are able to read some of the instructions that come with those aircraft. So it will take at the very least 6 months before the pilots can fly those aircraft. So realistically, no clear timeline beyond that, but certainly not before next year.
Right, we'll leave it at that. Dasha and Alex, thanks for joining. Indian spacecraft Chandrayaan-3 has reached closer to the moon, and the soft landing on the lunar South Pole is scheduled around 1804 hours IST on the 23rd of August. India's space agency, the ISRO, said the module would undergo internal checks and await sunrise at the designated landing site. DD India correspondent Jay Singh has more.
Well, all the eyes are on the lander for its rendezvous with the surface of the moon close to the South Pole with a soft landing. Now, at the moment, it is revolving around the moon at an orbit of around 25 kilometers closest to the point of South Pole to the moon, and at the furthest distance of 134 kilometers. So, till 23rd of this month, till the sun rises, it will be on the same path. Once the sun rises by around 5:45 p.m., for us it may be evening, but for the moon it will be like the morning. So when that by around 5:45 p.m. on Wednesday, on 23rd of this month, the powered descent phase is supposed to begin, which will be facilitated by an autonomous process. All the inbuilt software commands are loaded into the computer in the lander called Vikram, which is named after the father of Indian space program, Vikram Sarabhai. Vikram means also whaler. And it will be first from 5:45 to 6 hours 4 minutes in the evening. It will be the crucial, most important phase that will determine the success of the soft landing of Chandrayaan-3.
Time for another breather. Still to come on DD India News Hour. In the Cincinnati Open, 7-seed Coco Gauff bags the biggest title of her young career. And in the men's competition, Novak Djokovic beats world #1 Carlos Alcaraz to win the Cincinnati Open. You're watching DD India News Hour. Time now for all the sports action. In women's tennis, 7-seed Coco Gauff beat Carolina Muchova 6-3, 6-4 to win the biggest title of her young career at the Cincinnati Open. Gauff broke the Czech 3 times in the opening set and confidently served out the opener to love in her first WTA final appearance. In the men's side, Novak Djokovic overcame a match point to beat world #1 Carlos Alcaraz 5-7, 7-6, 7-6 to win the Cincinnati Open. The win delivered Djokovic his 95th career title and 39th Masters 1000 crown. He will look to add a 24th Grand Slam trophy to his collection at the upcoming US Open. That's all then in this edition of DD India News Hour, but let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook as well as X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram too. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Munmun Bhattacharya. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.